Hello friends! Today, after 6, I want to discuss a topic that lives rent-free in my head for a decade. There is this one thought that I keep getting on my way to my 9-to-5 job almost every single day. Is this the job that I'm meant to be doing? Is this the career that I wanted? You see, I think us as humans, we have so many passions, interests, hobbies, and we have such a limited time to explore all of them. So we make our career choice at quite a young age, and then we follow this choice. We get on a job, we get on another job, and then as we get older, we keep getting these thoughts and questions being louder and louder in our head. What have you achieved in your 30s? Other people in their 30s started a startup and got millions of investments in VC money. And you have hundreds of ideas in your head. Why don't you do a startup instead of your job? You finally would be able to put that CEO and co-founder in your LinkedIn profile. This is what you want. You should quit your job and do the startup now. What are you doing with your life? Sitting 8 hours a day by your laptop, doing meaningless job, whilst other people, they benefit the community. They do small businesses, bake bread, do retreats, and you have meaningless career. You need to change it. You need to impact the humanity, not the shareholders' value. Quit your job. Do yoga retreat instead. That was your dream. Remember, follow your heart. Wait, so we keep getting all of these questions in our head, but is there a way to get some answers to those questions? Well, you probably can ask your friends, family, or a therapist, or you can ask for advice, career coach. And I just happen to know one. Her name is Kate, and she lives in Paris. She's a professional career coach and a career strategist. So you know what? Let's just call her and ask all of those career questions. Let's do it. Hi, Kate. How are you?
Hi, Angela. I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing very well. I'm very excited for today's call. I've prepared so many questions for you. I hope you're ready.
I am ready. Let's do it.
Let's get this one started. So, Kate, I was just thinking to myself, if you can first explain who career coach is.
Person that helps professionals figure out their career questions. So it could be something that has to do with career growth, maybe career changes, transitions, so working on promotion, or even figuring out how to land a new job or a completely different career.
Can anyone become a coach then?
Let's say there's a lot of people that call themselves coaches without having a specific certification. I'm not saying that they shouldn't be doing that, but let's say that this is a standard that helps you follow certain rules and requirements that are needed enable for you to help other people. So things like, psychological safety, creating space, knowing how to ask the questions, how to listen, where not to step too much into the client's world, and so on. So it's basically just a standard of quality of the session. Yeah.
How long you've been doing career coaching now?
Yeah. So I've been doing it for 3 years.
And what were you doing before?
Yeah. So before I was working as a lead or a head of copywriting or UX writing departments in tech companies. So I was, mainly occupying leadership positions in the last year. So it was mainly, obviously hiring, promoting, growing the team, helping the team succeed, motivating, and so on.
So let's imagine the situation. Someone's in now. They realize suddenly they don't like their job, whether it's person is an accountant or a manager or a marketing manager, and they don't really yet know what they like, but they kind of, okay, I'm done with it. This job bothers me so much. I feel so tired. Do you have like a framework or a set of advices? Where do I start?
So I think, it's an excellent kind of start, especially when you start thinking, okay, I don't like my job anymore, or I hate my job, which is, a stronger statement. I would recommend starting from that and trying to understand, what does that really mean? Because it can mean many things. Trying to enter a room which, has the lights turn off and you can't really see things. But when you turn the lights on, you're like, okay, I don't like where the lamp is. I don't like where the plant is, and so on. So our job is kind of like to look, turn on the lights and understand what's exactly not working.
Yeah. Okay. So step one, I'm just gonna write it down, is to write down or understand what exactly you don't like.
Yeah. And, you can divide kind of like these things in three. So one could be, certain things that are cyclical, meaning they're temporary. You're working on a project that is not exciting, or, there's a period in the company, there's a merger in the company, and that's very stressful. But you understand that that's temporary. So that will end. So, and sometimes, people kind of like get stressed and they're like, I hate my job, because there's this, kind of like difficult period. So it's important to kind of like see it, face it, and kind of like voice, or rather verbalize that, okay, this is the problem. This is the project that is, like frustrating for me, but it's going to end. So, and then, you can potentially discuss with your manager, with your team, how you can kind of like live through this change in a way that is not so damaging to you. Another thing is obviously like looking at the culture of the company that you're in. And sometimes, there are things that are not really resonating with us on a values level, actually. And sometimes, again, like when people spend too much time in the same kind of space, they get too used to it. But, in the end, kind of when there's like a values conflict, that will explode at some point. So, we need to also look at that and understand, how are our relationship with, our management team, our team, the company overall, companies stand on certain topics that are important to us, and so on.
So what I hear now is step one, we define what is it exactly I don't like about my job.
Yeah.
Is it cyclical, as you said? Is it something repeatable? Or is it the core of the job? Step two, you do the values check, right? As you said. Can you talk me, what are values in a job?
I think, from, let's say, a company perspective, that's pretty easy. Since we're all, a lot of us and most of my clients are working in tech, what we do, which is open a company page and check the values of the company. Then obviously sometimes the values of the company don't really correspond with what the company is really doing. So that's, something that we can check and see, if the company says on the company page one thing, but actually that's not what's happening. That's also something that we can note down and kind of like translate for ourselves. And then we can compare that with our values. Now, the interesting point is that many people don't really know their values because they don't really have time to figure them out, We have a lot of time to talk about, AI advancements, the news and so on, but then we don't really know what's important to us. So, of course, spending time to understand what is important, what has shaped us throughout our lives, and what is a non-negotiable is very important step for a person to have. So it's like having your own navigation map that you can compare with your job, with the people that you hang out with, a movie that you're about to see, to understand if that's, something that matches what you are or not.
That's such a good point, because I remember when I started my therapy years ago, one of the first things the therapist told me, do you have set of your values? And I was like, yeah, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And she was like, whoa, name 3 core values. And I'm like, all of them are core values. And she's like, no, not all of them are core values. And core values and how you prioritize them actually is literally like your guide in making life-changing decisions, something that will help you when you're shifting jobs, relations, countries, whatever, you name it. Okay, on the step 2,
I looked at the company values and I saw my values. All right, my value number one is a family. Well, job obviously has nothing to do with the family, probably. Hopefully they don't say that we're a family job. So
That's a huge red flag.
we'll talk about that later on. So let's see, I'm performing the values check. And then I'm like, where do I put goals in that values check? Do I even...
When you say goals, you mean like your personal goals? Or...
Yeah. Like my value is a family, but I want to earn money and I don't know, to be successful in my job. How does that correspond? Because it, like the second one to me sounds more like a goal, while the first one is a value. And you said the step 2 is a value.
Yeah.
You go deeper and try to map it out as a goal as well. Or what is the next step, basically?
Yeah. I think it's an interesting example, the one that you shared about like, how do I place my family value in the company's value? In fact, you actually don't, because company is kind of like a vehicle for you to, of course, gain money, but also like, there are other like some extra bonus things that you get from the work, the people that you work on, the project that you work on, and so on. Hopefully, of course, there are people that only get the salary, all the rest is terrible. We're coming for them. So, overall, kind of like expecting that the company satisfies your family value wouldn't be right. But then asking yourself, okay, how can I stay true to my family value, considering kind of the things that I need to do as a part of my job? That would be the direction that I would look at. And so I would then go in and look at the family value and see, what does that mean? It means that I want to spend my evenings with my partner and my kids, or I want to have time and mental space to call my family, because sometimes we're so busy that we don't really even, have the energy to do those things. So kind of like, try to understand, what are the things that incorporate in this value, and try to understand, like, is there an intersection? Because sometimes there is, because sometimes if we don't have our boundaries set, then the work can actually kind of grab our personal space, which, in a way is not just the responsibility of the company, but it's our responsibility as well, because we are responsible for guarding our personal time. But then we also have responsibilities in front of the company, because, it's kind of like an exchange. We're exchanging our skills and time for the salary that we're getting.
Yeah. And so then the step 3 is to see if there is an intersection in between your values and a company.
Yeah.
And what would be the next step after this? Let's see, I've checked and there is, or there isn't. In fact, what do I do then?
So, maybe the last thing, if what I would look at is try to understand, if it's not any of the two. So if, values are fine, what we said about the project, that the project is fine and so on. We try to look at, maybe this just doesn't fit into our current, lifestyle, because sometimes things are changing. Our interests are changing. We are shifting as people, as we grow up, we change. And I think, a lot of people kind of forget about it, that we do change, and the environment changes and the context changes. And, with the AI now, the world has changed completely. So all of these changes that are happening around us are also influencing kind of like how we see things, how we see, things like work, things like personal life, and so on. So, there are these kind of like influences that can also, have an impact on our relationship with the job. And that's when, people kind of like say, hey, I used to do this for 10 years, but now I'm not excited anymore. I'm not as excited as before. Well, of course, because you have changed, it's not the shiny job that you were, you started when you were like 25 and, you were doing something exciting and so on. And now you're not in the same kind of like context.
Yeah. And so let's say you've done it for 10 years and you don't feel connected as much anymore. And you've done all of those steps, all of those 4 steps that you've just mentioned. So is it what they call a career crisis?
Yeah. I mean, probably. But it could be a couple of things, you know. We can't really say that for sure it's career crisis. But I would kind of like pose that question. Maybe it's a crisis point. Could be burnout as well. Could be both, you know. They can also be together.
What is the difference between career crisis and a burnout?
So burnout is mostly physiological and emotional kind of symptom. So basically, it's the result of, you know, you feel exhausted, you feel lack of energy, probably because your boundaries have been compromised, maybe some other things. Career crisis or identity crisis is more psychological and existential, because there it's not kind of the physical symptom, but it's more, you know, kind of that feeling of being lost, not understanding, you know, why things that were working before are not working anymore.
What are the symptoms of the career crisis then? What are red flags of the career you're doing or the job you're doing?
Yeah. Well, I think I mentioned a few already. So it's definitely career and identity confusion. So when you're a bit confused, and especially it happens to people that are already like in senior or lead positions, which have the confidence, they have the expertise, but then they're kind of like feeling weird. Like, why I don't understand, you know, why I don't have it all, you know, under control anymore. So, and that's, you know, a very scary place to be. Then another thing is a confidence drop. So obviously, you know, as you're lost, then your confidence is dropping, which is not a nice feeling at all. Then obviously it's also a values mismatch. So again, like as you're growing professionally, but also personally, sometimes your values, they change. So that's also something that, you know, we need to be aware of, that the values are not kind of like set in stone. And it's also good from time to time to check if they're changing, you know, or maybe there are certain life events that have impacted our values and they have, you know, changed, or maybe they're not as true to us as before.
But then it sounds to me like career crisis is quite a normal state. You know what I mean? Like, I think most of the people then go through career crisis in their lives because it sounds very normal. You know what I mean? A lot of people are going through it. Would you say career crisis is something that happened to most of the people?
You know, it's a good question. From one point, I don't want to be biased because obviously, you know, I speak to people that are going through this every day. So I would say yes. But it's my bubble, you know, it's the people that surround me. It's, you know, I'm working with a specific industry and so on. But actually, I was like recently, I actually had a conversation with my grandma. And I remember that she also at some point, like, you know, and she's a totally different generation. She's not yet. And I was like, I remember at some point, you know, you're working in this enterprise and then you went to change your career. And I'm like, how did you do that? And she was like, she was around 50 and, you know, she kind of like, she changed it. And for her, in her case, it was like for health reasons and so on, but still, you know, health reasons, personal reasons, influence kind of like the changes that can happen. Then I'm pretty sure that for us, for our generation, maybe like the age in which the career crisis happens is earlier. Because we also start to work earlier, you know, kind of like the progression in tech companies is also pretty steep. So, you know, if you're performing well, you're working hard and so on, you can get at a pretty high point super fast. And then, you know, we have people that are in their 30s, but they're like directors or VPs and so on. And then, I mean, it's kind of like it's a natural reaction, you know.
If career crisis is kind of something you can go through, right, with a career coach, with family therapy, whatever, what about the burnout? Is it also something that happens to most of people? Is it also common?
Well, it's a fact. It's common for our industry. There's been numerous researches that with, numbers around 60 to 70% of people that are, either had burnout or are going through burnout in tech. So, that's a fact and it's happening.
People treat burnout differently than the career crisis. I think my question is, what is the difference in treating both?
So, for example, for me as a career coach, it happened that I had clients that were more on the burnout side. They had both, like a career crisis and burnout. And for me, what's important, if there is burnout or there has been, it's better to focus on that, because there's a physiological reaction sometimes that it's connected, with health issues and health symptoms. So what I would recommend to my clients is to focus on that first. I prefer that therapy is also involved. So if they're not in active therapy, I do recommend, my colleagues and professionals that are, practicing therapy and working as psychotherapists to treat that, kind of question separately. And when they're at let's say, the stable place, physiologically and emotionally, then we can start on, kind of like figuring out the career questions. Because often for people that are going through burnout, they simply just don't have the energy to act. And in coaching, we are acting. Coaching is about encouraging agency, encouraging steps, encouraging experiments. And for that, you really need energy. So, and with burnout, you don't have that. So usually in such situations, I prefer that my clients, dedicate the time to regain that energy, to, kind of like restore the level of their energy. And then when they have enough energy for action, then we can act.
Let's imagine you in a state, you say you don't really like your job. And then you look around and you see all of those amazing, successful people who've done so well with their jobs and their careers, and who made these incredible results, either, establishing their company or becoming a manager or whatever the achievement is for someone. I guess my question here is like, how do you know if the job you are doing is the job that meant for you, despite the crisis or burnout? Or how do you know when you still will be a good fit for this job? Are there green flags that you kind of know, okay, I can do these checks. This is the phase of a burnout, career crisis, whatever, but I know I will still be connected to this job. How does one know those greenish blooming flags?
I think what I would look at is, of course, like your energy level, because sometimes, when we think about our jobs, we associate them only with the tasks that we have to do, but we forget, all the other amazing things that we have. It's like the team and the people that we have close to us. And in fact, like to me, that has always been like one of the core things that was important in my job. And that's kind of, the beauty of working for a company, because you work in a group, and as social species, as humans, we're very social species. And therefore, if the team is great, that's a good kind of environment to be in. If you feel the camaraderie, if you feel, energized when you're, sharing your ideas with people, you feel psychologically safe. That's a green flag to me. Then, I would look at the energy level, of course, and monitor that and try to understand, how much energy do I have? What are the days that I have more energy? What are the days that I have less energy? And what are the things that are influencing that level of energy? Because sometimes, if it's, performance review season, everybody hates that, because you need to fill out numerous documents on yourself, other people, projects, and so on. And it's like something that people really hate. And that's not a very, energetic time, to be in the company. But when we're launching a new project, when we're giving freedom to try something, that's stimulating, that's amazing. And so, I would look at the things that are kind of like giving us that energy or not.
So it sounds also almost like an opportunities that the job gives you, right?
Yes. I agree. In fact, I think growth opportunities are important. Sometimes I was wondering, is growth important to a lot of people? But again, in our industry, in tech, it is, because we are building innovation for the humanity. So people that are mostly, the people that are working in tech are mostly interested in growth. So if there are no growth opportunities and you're stagnating, and for example, you've been asking for a promotion for 3 years and nothing has changed, that could be a red flag to look at and understand, maybe it's the company, maybe it's the manager, maybe it's just not the right place for you to get what you want.
Right. So the green flags are so far team, energy, and opportunities. You didn't mention anything about financial gain, or is it on purpose, or am I, or is it a part of opportunity?
No, it's cool that you observed that, but maybe it's just because for me it's not kind of like a core topic at the moment, even though it's important. I'm not saying that we exist with money, obviously, so we need that, but for me, kind of like this, the salary, even in my world, was kind of like always coming second, which is, I don't know. I think, again, it's common in our industry because people are motivated by projects, technology, and things like that. And so like the salary obviously has to match the grid and what you're doing and blah, 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 blah. But again, if the company is okay and they have, their salary grids in place, that's going to happen.
And I think that's a brilliant point. And I wrote down so far 4 points for the green flags, just for someone who's in doubt to kind of reassess the situation. Is the team you're working with, and obviously for me personally, like people are the most important part of the job. Then the energy, whether you have it or not. Then the opportunity, again, whether you have it or not, for growth. And then salary increase, and this one is optional. Is there anything else you would add to the list of green flags?
I mean, let's add values, even though we have talked plenty about them, but I think they are important. And again, like just kind of like do a check from time to time to understand if there is a connection with what is important to you and what the company is doing and how the company is, because sometimes, kind of like that point gets overlooked, and then we find ourselves then in career crisis. So just trying to understand if kind of like the company is moving in the right direction with where you are moving as well.
We talked about the green flags, and it seems to me quite a lot of the people can look at their job and say, hey, my job is quite fine as for the moment. But I'm wondering, is it such thing as a perfect job? Is there such thing as I was meant to be doing this job, or is it a myth?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of content on kind of like finding your purpose and, finding the perfect job and so on. And actually, I like them. I like those videos. And I think it's very interesting, to look into that perspective. But to me, I think it's a myth because as we know, perfect things don't exist in anything, but as people, we kind of like want to achieve this perfection in our career, in our relationship, and so on. This is random, but I was just reading a book recently, and there was like this idea that we live in an era because we're living a consumptionist era, and we're trying to kind of like have the best experience, the best relationship, the best job, and so on. And that's really hard to attain, right? So, to be happy all the time and so on, impossible. But what we can aim for is more alignment. So something that resonates with us, something that connects to our values, to our interests, taps into our strengths, and things like that. So that could be a direction that we can look at instead of looking to attain perfection, because that's a myth, and that's a huge illusion, I think.
And I also think that's a huge responsibility to put yourself in the pressure, to put yourself in a situation when you have to pursue greatness and perfection in every single thing that you do, including your job. It's more difficult to admit the mistakes you're doing, and without making those mistakes, probably there is no growth in everything, not only in your career. So I'm definitely on your side here that it's a miss, but I will be honest, it took me some moment, maybe years, to realize it for myself personally. We talked about the green flags, but I feel like green flags are very broad. What about the practical things? Like, how do I practically almost manage my career in a way that will be helpful for me, even without the coaching, just for me as a person?
Okay, so probably, I mean, that's of course boundaries, like trying to understand how your boundaries are set up, if they are set up, because sometimes they're not. Trying to understand, if your strengths are being utilized, and you feel that you're kind of like bringing your strength to the table, because very often we find ourselves in environments when kind of like people push us to work on our weaknesses, and then our strengths are just on the shelf waiting to be utilized, and that's a very sad story.
But even these two are very, very good, because as you were talking about the strengths, I'm thinking to myself, at the moment you're doubting your career or your job, it's very easy to think about other people and thinking, oh, they have this position or this job. Yeah. I can do this as well. But I think it really depends, as you say, how you utilize your strengths. Are there like any tools, I don't know, tests or some kind of a thing you can do to understand your strengths? Because it might be the case that you've been working on some job thinking you're utilizing your strengths, but you're not actually utilizing your strength, or something that you think you can do require a different set of strengths as you had. Is there a way to check what are our strengths?
Definitely. So, I mean, of course, there are different tests that we can do, like personality and strengths test. I think now a very pretty famous one is the Clifton Strengths test that you can do to figure out what are your core personality strengths. Then there is a pretty popular one, Lumina, that can also tell you kind of like your strengths and weaknesses as well, and how you can work on them. There's a free test that is called 16 Personalities. That's also a pretty famous one, and it's very cute. It has like different these little mascots for each personality. And even though it's free, it gives you like a great insight into what are the leading things that you have at the moment. But apart from tests, I think it's also important to kind of like act on the feedback that you're collecting at work, because it's very interesting, and also be pretty strategic about like how you ask for that feedback, because sometimes the feedback is very much connected to the projects that you're working on, but not to kind of like the kind of other strengths that you have and that are seen in other instances, for example. So I think, apart from like analyzing and working with the feedback that you get from your direct manager, you can also ask random people that work with you on a daily basis, for feedback on, hey, like how was it like communicating with me, or how was it like, getting feedback from me, or, some other things like what are the three words that I'm associated with, in your opinion, to you, what are the three things that you think about when you think about me? So kind of like collecting those points is very important, but also like collecting feedback from people outside of your working environment is very interesting, like your friends, your relatives, and so on. That could also be pretty, revelatory, because in tests, sometimes it's also tricky because you are the one answering the questions, and sometimes you're also biased. It really very much depends on the context and so on. So sometimes, those results are not always stable, they're changing and so on. So I think kind of like doing this 360 feedback collection and trying to understand, what are your strengths and how they are perceived by other people. That's also an interesting one.
I know you shifted your career to coaching. How does that change you? Do you feel happier?
Definitely feel more aligned, because I'm doing something that interests me. Overall, kind of like the change from a full-time to solopreneur is also something exciting and something that I always wondered how that would be. Would I be capable of doing that? And so it's a very challenging kind of place to be in, not having a team, having to, do the marketing on my own, having to do the design content on my own, not having anybody to give me feedback or help me, produce a better result. So all those things are, pretty challenging, but also pretty exciting for me because they're very interesting. But overall, it's not that I'm constantly in a happy place and my life hasn't, been better before. I definitely get moments where I'm doubting myself. I'm not confident. Sometimes, I'm scared to do certain things. Yesterday, I presented a special Black Friday offer, and that's the first thing, the first time that I did that. I created the design, I created the offer, and I'm, actually actively selling it. And to me, all of those things are my firsts, and and it's scary, but I'm motivated by, kind of like my curiosity, my interest to try, and to also, kind of like get better at that. Because for me, the ultimate aspiration is to learn kind of to do more things and also to kind of get more of the freedom where I can be the one, kind of like making decisions, trying things, seeing how they're working, and ultimately knowing that all the things that I'm doing for me. I'm not doing for somebody else. And kind of like all my passion, all my vision, all that is directed on kind of like the impact that I'm having on me, on my business, on my clients, and so on.
What would be your advice to someone who is considering changing a job now?
Definitely don't do it alone. Do it alone. And when I was doing it, I was not doing it alone. I was in therapy. I was working with a coach. I was kind of like taking all the help possible I could get, so that I don't end up with, a decision that is not well thought, that is a bit reactive, and a decision that I would regret. So, kind of like having that support is important, and, thinking all your options through, and understanding, kind of like the consequences, but also like maybe trying to not only look at the success examples, but also look at the failures and know and understand how people are actually facing these changes, and that sometimes they're not as amazing as they seem on the internet, because we kind of associate the exit from corporate as freedom and, happiness and perfect life, but it's not always like that. It's in a way, when we're in a company, we're a bit like, the company is kind of like our parent and we're the child. When we get outside, we immediately become the adult because nobody's taking care of us. We're paying our taxes on our own. We need to think of all the things that the company was covering before. So that's a very shocking place to be in. So you definitely need, kind of like to prepare for that. But again, I'm not saying that don't do it. Like, I'm still here. I'm still enjoying it. I like the challenge, but, I'm also somebody who loves challenges in life, and kind of the decisions that I take usually are not the easy ones, which is very sadistic of me, but that's who I am, that's my personality.
But you end up being in a happy place. You end up being more fulfilled. So then it makes sense. You kind of know you paid the price and you had a sacrifice, but then you also have a personal achievement. And you also changed, as you said before, as a person, which means a lot. And you have to adapt to that.
Yeah, that I would rephrase, I wouldn't call it a sacrifice. I think I was calling it a sacrifice at the beginning, but now I call it an investment. I'm investing.
Yeah, I like it.
It's more like a positive, way of because words matter. As a UX writer in the past, words still matter, even as a coach. So,
and as you said, words matter, obviously, also because when you communicate to yourself, and you probably should be the most important person in your life, you also can shift those words and really put a lot more of love and acceptance and
support. Yeah, especially in moments of transition and change like that, we need that support, and it's not easy, right? Because our inner critic is in their full action. They're like, "Oh my gosh, look at you failing right now." That's me all the time. Yeah. So it's also the inner work of working on kind of like growing our caring parent within us that cares for us and is there and is supporting us, and also fights with the inner critic.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing this, Kate. I feel like I want to end it on this positive note, but I also want to ask you about the future of career market or job market. And I think living in the AI revolution, every single conversation we're having still includes AI. So I'm going to ask you, do you think AI in any way will impact your work and all of the attitudes that we have towards our job?
I think it definitely will impact everybody. I think in many ways it will help us to be more effective and kind of like to focus on things that are more important. I hope that as humans we'll be able to do more creative work and kind of like get rid of the admin and all the things that we need to do in between that we don't enjoy. But I don't know, I hope that bureaucracy will somehow disappear thanks to AI. If not, then I don't know why we need that.
I hope so too. Do you recommend, that's going to be an interesting one, do you recommend people using ChatGPT as a career coach or therapy looking for advice? Because I know people who do that.
Yeah, I know people who use it as a therapist, and that's pretty dangerous. I actually have a post, I wrote about it on LinkedIn a few weeks back, and I don't recommend to use ChatGPT as a coach and as a therapist because there are certain tendencies of ChatGPT, to kind of like to agree with our statements, to not challenge us enough, but also like to ignore other expressions that we have as humans, in our face or in our body. All those things are, ChatGPT is lacking, but also something else that ChatGPT or any LLM is taking from us by like being our therapist or coach is actually the experience that we gain in the process, because we kind of like get an insight, as a output from ChatGPT, and it feels like an insight, and we're like, I have this insight, but is it really? It's not your insight, because insight is something that you feel in yourself, and you're like, oh, that's it, and that's not, it may sound exciting, but if it's not something that you have lived, you have experienced, it's not actually going to help, and it's not going to transform you. It's not going to make you grow and so on. So, I'm not kind of like anti-ChatGPT, somehow I use it, to help me like think some things through and so on, but definitely like asking for advice, no.
Right. So do not use ChatGPT as your therapist. I can also confirm, I don't think that's a good idea. But a part of that, thank you so much, Kate. That was amazing. I feel like all of us, we've just got ourselves a free tester of a session with a career coach. Honestly, I feel so much more confident. I feel an ease after this one, because I was coming to this one with a lot of heavy thoughts and thinking to myself, I am overthinking a lot of things in my work. And I feel like you are the right person to put some things into the right buckets and to just give yourself that bird view of your problems and give yourself a bit of a breather from all of the anxious thoughts.
Thank you so much for all your questions. I think thanks to you, we managed to dive into different topics, and I hope that will be helpful for folks looking to into these career questions and existential questions and trying to understand, how to get out of that. But I think, kind of the last thought that I would share here is that, we live in a messy world, and our careers as a result of that also become messy. But I think that it's important to normalize that mess, because we kind of like think that we used to think a lot, and still people think that career has to be linear. It has to be the same. We have to be in the same place all the time. And we kind of like don't allow the mess into our lives. But actually, mess is normal because people are messy. Our lives are messy. We live in a messy time. And that's, totally fine.
Yeah, and that's a part of the process, right? Just a part of our life. I agree with that. It takes time, though, to understand it. But I'm really, really happy you've mentioned this because that also really resonates with me. So, folks, we've discussed with Kate that you can leave your questions in a comment. And for those questions who will gain most of the likes or just most of the repeated questions, Kate will be able to answer on her LinkedIn, and her LinkedIn will appear here now. And as well, just make sure to comment and make sure to watch it, to share it with your friends. That was the free coaching session. So I think that's quite a good idea why you need to share this one. Thank you so much, Kate. It was my pleasure. And I hope we will have a next one here on this channel with you answering thousands of questions from comments.